The escape plan was taking shape, but I did not know how much time we had. The guards were growing restless, the quotas were rising, and men were dying faster than they could be replaced. The camp was a place of exhaustion and despair, but beneath it all, something else was stirring. Hope. I visited Kemet the next night, and the night after that. We did not speak of the plan, not directly. There were too many ears in the camp, too many eyes that watched, too many men who would sell their own mothers for a mouthful of bread. But I could see it in his eyes. The fire was burning brighter now. He had hope. Senua was the one who guided us. He was old, bent, his hands like claws twisted and gnarled from 20 years of gripping stone. But his mind was sharp as a blade. He had studied the guards' routines for 2 decades. He knew when they slept. He knew when they drank. He knew when they looked away. "We must be patient," Senua said one night, his voice barely a whisper. "The desert does not forgive haste. It swallows the careless. It buries the foolish. We must wait for the right night." Kemet nodded. He was learning patience. He was learning to wait. But I was not patient. I had spent years waiting for my brother to return, waiting for my shame to fade, waiting for the courage to act. I could not wait any longer. I began to help them in secret. I brought extra water hidden in my cloak, slipped to Kemet when no one was watching. I brought dried bread, herbs, a small knife. I told myself it was not enough. I told myself I was not really helping. I was just easing my own guilt. But Kemet saw it differently. One night, we sat together in the shadows, the firelight flickering against the stone walls. He looked at me and said, "You are risking your life for us." "Why?" I said, "Because I could not save my brother. But I can save you." He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were tired, but they were not empty. "You carry a heavy burden, Senua." "I know," I said, "but I am learning to carry it differently." He said, "When I escape, I will take you with me. I will not leave you behind." I smiled a small, fragile smile. "You said that before." "I meant it," he said, "and I mean it now." I did not know if I believed him, but I wanted to. The days passed. The work continued. The hammers never stopped that endless, grinding sound that wore down the soul as much as the body. But the night of the escape was drawing near. Senua had studied the stars. He knew the time. He had measured the distance. He had planned the route. 3 more nights, he said. Then we go. I felt my heart race. 3 more nights. Then everything would change. But I also felt fear. Fear that they would be caught. Fear that they would die. fear that I would be left behind alone with my shame, my guilt, my regret. I thought of my brother. I thought of his face, the face I had not seen in 6 years. I thought of how he had called my name and how I had not answered. I thought of the shame I had carried ever since. I had not failed Kemet. I would not fail him. I would help him escape. I would set him free, even if it cost me everything. That night, I looked up at the stars. The same stars my father had taught me to read. The same stars Kemet had taught me to trust. They burned in silence, cold and distant, and yet they felt closer than they had in years. I whispered a prayer, not to the Pharaoh, not to the gods of Egypt, but to the stars themselves. Let them be free, I whispered. Let them be free. I did not know if the stars were listening, but I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer the girl who hid in the shadows. I was no longer the girl who watched the world crumble and did nothing. I was a healer, a protector, a keeper of hope. And that, child, that is a kind of freedom too. The countdown had begun. 3 nights, then 2, then 1. I could feel the tension growing in the camp, like a storm building on the horizon. The air was thick with it, heavy, electric, alive. The men moved differently. They spoke less. They watched the guards more closely. They knew something was coming. Senua had studied the guards' routines for 20 years. He knew exactly when they would sleep. He knew exactly when they would drink. He knew exactly when they would look away. He had taught Kemet to read the stars, to find the northern star, to navigate the desert, to follow the path that led to freedom. The bright one points north, Senua said. Follow it. It will lead you home. Kemet had memorized the route. He had measured the distance. He had prepared his mind for the journey. But preparation was not just about the mind. It was about the body. It was about the soul. Kemet began to hide small portions of bread beneath his tunic, dried, hard, but enough to survive. He filled a small leather pouch with water. He sharpened the blade of the knife I had given him. He was ready, but he was not safe. I saw him one night, sitting alone beneath the stars. His face was tired, but his eyes were burning. I sat beside him. "Are you afraid?" I asked. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes, I am afraid, but I am more afraid of staying." I understood. Fear of the unknown was powerful, but fear of the known was worse. The known was a slow death. The known was endless labor, endless suffering, endless silence. "You will survive," I said. "You have survived everything else. You will survive this too." He looked at me. you? He asked. Will you survive? I did not know. I had never thought about myself. I had only thought about him. I will be fine, I said. I have survived worse. He did not believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but he did not press. The final night arrived. The moon was dark. The stars were bright. The wind was still. It was the perfect night for escape. Senu gathered us in the shadows. His voice was barely a whisper. Tonight we go. When the guards change shifts, there is a gap, a small window. It is only a few moments, but it is enough. He looked at Kemet. You must run. Do not look back. Do not stop. Do not hesitate. The desert is waiting, and the desert is patient. Kemet nodded. I felt my heart pounding. My hands were trembling. I wanted to say something that would make everything better. But there were no words. I reached out and took Kemet's hand. Go, I said, be free. He looked at me. I will come back for you. I smiled a small, fragile smile. I know. He did not say goodbye. He simply turned and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there for a long time, child. I stood there until the stars began to fade. I stood there until the sun began to rise. I did not know if I would ever see him again, but I knew one thing. I had finally done what I should have done years ago. I had not hidden. I had not looked away. I had chosen courage over fear. And that, child, that is the first step toward freedom. But the journey was only beginning. The desert was vast. The dangers were many. And I could only wait and hope. The night was darker than I had ever known. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the stars seemed to hold their breath. The camp was silent, deathly silent, as if the world itself was waiting for what was about to happen. I watched from the shadows as Kemet and Senu moved toward the edge of the camp. They moved like shadows themselves, silent, low, invisible. They had waited for the guards to change shift, and now the gap was open. A small window. A few moments, it was enough. Kemet looked back for just a moment. I saw his face. I saw his eyes. He was afraid, but he was determined. He was not running from fear. He was running toward freedom. Senu placed a hand on his shoulder. Go, boy. Do not look back. Kemet looked forward. He disappeared into the desert. Senu followed him slowly, carefully, but with a strength I did not know he had. For a moment, I saw the man he had been 20 years ago. Young, strong, full of hope. Then they were gone. I stood there, frozen. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I wanted to run after them. I wanted to call out to them, but I knew I could not. I had made my choice. I had chosen courage over fear. Now I had to live with it. The minutes passed like hours. The silence was heavy. I could hear my own breathing, loud, ragged, desperate. I prayed to every god I knew. I prayed to Ra. I prayed to Osiris. I prayed to the spirits of the Nile. I prayed that they would survive. And then I heard it. Shouts, the clatter of spears, the pounding of feet. The guards had discovered them. My heart stopped. I saw torches flickering in the distance. I heard the baying of dogs. I heard the shouts of men, angry, desperate, hunting. They are gone, I heard someone say. They cannot have gone far. I felt my blood turn cold. They were still close. The guards were still hunting. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But I had made a promise to myself, to Kemet, to the memory of my brother. I would not hide anymore. I stepped out of the shadows. A guard saw me. He shouted, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I said nothing. I simply looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not tremble. He stared at me for a moment. Then he looked away. He was not interested in me. He was interested in the escapees. He ran past me. He did not look back. I stood there for a long time, child. I stood there until the stars began to fade. I stood there until the sun began to rise. I did not know if Kemet and Senua had survived. I did not know if they had been caught. I did not know if they were dead or alive. But I knew one thing. I had done what I could. I had chosen courage. I had chosen hope. I had chosen freedom. And that, child, that is something no one can take away from you. The days that followed were the longest of my life. I woke each morning not knowing if Kemet and Senua were alive or dead. I worked alongside the other healers, tending to the wounded, bandaging the broken. But my mind was elsewhere. My heart was in the desert, running beside them. The guards had searched the desert for 3 days. They found nothing. No tracks, no bodies, no sign of them. The desert had swallowed them whole. I heard the guards muttering among themselves. They must have died out there. No one survives the desert without water. They were fools. They will be vulture food by now. I said nothing. I kept my head down, but I knew the truth. Kemet was not a fool. He was a survivor. He had survived the march. He had survived the camp. He would survive the desert. I clung to that hope. Weeks passed. The guards stopped searching. The camp returned to its brutal routine. The hammers never stopped. The men kept dying. But I could not stop thinking about Kemet. And then one day, I heard something. A merchant had passed through the camp. He was selling dried fish and linen. He spoke of a settlement beyond the river, a small village where a stranger had appeared. A young man, he said, thin, burned by the sun. He walked out of the desert with nothing but the clothes on his back. He said he had been a conscript. He said he had escaped. My heart stopped. "Where is this village?" I asked. The merchant looked at me. 2 days north, follow the river. You will find it." I knew what I had to do. I had never left the camp since I arrived. I was afraid. I had no money, no protection, no guide. But I had something stronger, hope. I could not stay in the camp any longer. I had to know if he was alive. I had to see him with my own eyes. I gathered what I could: a small pouch of dried bread, a water skin, the herbs I had collected. I told no one where I was going. I simply walked away from the camp. I walked through the gates, and I did not look back. I traveled for 2 days. I followed the river north. The sun burned my skin. The sand filled my shoes. I was thirsty. I was tired. I was afraid. But I kept walking. I thought of my brother. I thought of how I had failed him. I thought of how I had not failed Kemet. I thought of the merchant's words. He said he had escaped. I held onto that hope. On the second evening, I saw the village. It was small, a cluster of mud brick huts along the river. Smoke rose from a hearth. Children played in the dust. I walked through the village. I asked the first person I saw. "I am looking for a stranger, a young man. He came from the desert." They pointed toward a small hut near the river. I walked toward it. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I opened the door, and there he was. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall. His face was gaunt. His skin was burned. His clothes were torn. But his eyes were the same. They were still burning. He looked up at me. He did not speak. He just stared. Then he smiled. "Senua," he said, "you found me." I wept. I ran to him. I held him. He held me. "Senu is gone," he said. "He died in the desert. He gave his life so I could live." I held him. I said nothing. There were no words. "How did you find me?" he asked. I said, "I heard a rumor. A man matching your description had been seen in a settlement beyond the river." I had to know. He said, "You left the camp. You walked through the desert alone." I said, "Yes." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I could not save my brother. But I would not let you die alone." He held my hand. He did not let go. I stayed in the village for several days. I tended to Kemet's wounds. I gave him water. I gave him food. He grew stronger. He told me about the escape. He told me about Senua's death. He told me about the desert. He said, I survived because I remembered you. I remembered your words. I remembered your hope. I said, and now? He said, now I will build a life. I will honor Senua's memory. I will live because he died so I could. I said, what about me? He looked at me. You will stay with me, he said. We will build a life together. I said, I cannot. I am a healer. There are people who need me. He said, then I will wait for you. I will build a home, and when you are ready, you will come to me. I said, do you promise? He said, I promise. I left the village the next morning. I walked back to the camp. I had work to do. I had people to heal. I had a promise to keep. I thought of Kemet every day. I thought of his face. I thought of his words. He was free. He was alive. And one day I would go to him. I returned to the camp the next morning. The gates welcomed me back like I had never left. The work continued. The hammers never stopped. But something had changed inside me. I knew Kemet was alive. I knew he was free. I knew he was building a life, and that one day I would join him. But that day was not yet. I had work to do. I had people to heal. I had a purpose to fulfill. And I had a promise to keep to myself, to my brother, to the memory of all those I had failed. So I stayed. I healed the wounded. I held the hands of the dying. I buried the dead. I carried their stories with me, just as I had promised I would. The seasons turned. The Nile flooded and receded. The sun rose and set, and still I stayed. 5 years passed. 5 years since Kemet had fled into the desert. 5 years since Senua had died, so he could live. 5 years since I had stood at the edge of the camp and watched him disappear into the darkness. The camp had changed. Some of the men I had healed were gone, dead, freed, or transferred to other sites. New faces arrived, young and frightened, just as Kemet had been. I healed them too. I held their hands. I whispered prayers for them, but I never forgot Kemet. I thought of him often. I wondered if he had found a new life. I wondered if he had found peace. I wondered if he remembered me, but I did not search for him. I had already found him once. Now, I had to trust that he would find his way back to me, and I waited. I thought of my brother. I thought of his face, the face I had not seen in years. I thought of how I had failed him, but I also thought of Kemet. I thought of how I had not failed him. I thought of how I had helped him escape. I thought of how I had given him hope, and I realized something, child. I realized that I was no longer the girl who hid in the shadows. I was no longer the girl who watched the world crumble and did nothing. I was a healer, a protector, a keeper of hope. I was free, not free from the camp, not free from my past, but free from the fear that had held me captive for so long. And that, child, that is a kind of freedom too. I waited and I waited and I trusted. And then one day, a stranger came to the camp. 5 years had passed since Kemet escaped. 5 years since I had found him in the village beyond the river. 5 years since I had walked back to the camp and waited. I had stopped counting the days. I had stopped hopping for his return. I had simply learned to live with the waiting. But I never forgot him. And then, one day, a stranger came to the camp. He was older now, his back bent, his face weathered, his hair touched with gray. But his eyes were the same. They were still burning. He walked up to me. He said nothing. He just looked at me. And then he smiled. "Senua," he said, "you kept your word, you waited." It was Kemet. I could not speak. I could not move. I just stared at him, this man who had been a boy, this boy who had become a man, this man who had survived the desert and found his way back. "I have a farm," he said, "by the river. I have a wife. I have children. But I have never forgotten the healer who called me a man." He reached out his hand. "I have come to take you home." I wept. I had spent years holding the hands of the dying, years carrying the weight of my own guilt, years forgetting what it felt like to be held. And now, someone had come for me. I said, "I am ready." Kemet took me away from the camp. He gave me a home. He gave me a family. He gave me a future. He died 2 winters ago. I was by his side. He smiled and said, "I see the green fields. I see my mother. I am coming home." He closed his eyes. He was free, finally, and truly free. And now, child, you know his story. The pyramid still stands beneath the Egyptian sun. Travelers gaze upon it and speak the pharaoh's name with wonder. But when I look upon those stones, I do not see a monument. I see the faces of the men who pulled them. I see the blood on the ropes. I see Kemet running through the sand. And I see a young healer who held his hand and believed in his dream. And so, child, I leave you with this simple truth. Kemet was not a king or a warrior. He was a farmer's son who refused to give up. He kept walking, hopping, believing, and in the end, he found his freedom. You do not need to be a hero to be brave. You just need to keep going, one step, one day, one breath at a time. That is what Kemet taught me, and that is what I pass to you. If this story found you tonight and you wish to return, I will be here. I am always here. Now rest, child. Close your eyes. Let the fire warm your face. Let your breath slow. In and out. Sleep, child. I will keep watch. I was there, and I am still here, always. And now, child, we have reached the end of our journey together. I have told you Kemet's story. I have told you my story. I have shared with you the pain, the hope, the courage, and the freedom that came from two souls who refused to give up. If this story touched your heart, if it helped you sleep, if it made you feel something, then I have done what I set out to do. I do not know where you are listening from tonight. Perhaps you are in a quiet room, a cozy home, a place where the stars shine brightly. But wherever you are, know this: you are not alone. We are all connected by the same stories, the same fire, the same hope. If you enjoyed this story, please support this channel. Subscribe so that I can create more stories like this, stories of forgotten voices, of courage in the darkness, of freedom found against all odds. I am just one storyteller, child. But with your support, I can keep these stories alive. I can keep the fire burning. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I was there. I am still here. And I will always be here, waiting for you. Sleep well, child. Dream of green fields. Dream of freedom. Dream of hope. Until we meet again.